While reading the book, the devil will come around us in different forms, but as long as we are in this circle, we are safe. If one of me goes out, he will surely die a painful death. Frank asked his friends.
Subscribe if you are making a part of one of your channel.
3 friends were sitting at a coffee shop and were tired of their poverty. They didn't have to work hard and were always stuck in a circle of shortcuts. Jeff said, "Man, how much fun these rich people have. Their houses, their cars, their lifestyle, their everything. Lower middle class, like us, just die with desire." Keith supported Jeff's point. Frank put his cup of coffee on the table and said in a low voice to both of them, "I know a way that if we succeed in doing it, we will become extremely rich." Jeff asked Frank curiously, "What is the method?" Frank didn't answer. He just took out a book from his bag and placed it on the table in front of both of them. Frank replied that this book has a way to control the devil. If devil gets under our control, we can earn immense wealth. Keith asked in surprise, "But we do not understand this work at all. It is not such an easy task. It is done by the people of the secret society." Frank said, "Yes, you are right. This work is not so easy. One mistake in this work can end our life. But think if we are successful, we will be freed from this life full of poverty. I have gathered a lot of information about this process." Frank said, "I have also read a lot of books in the last few months. A lot of research has also been done. I wanted to do this work alone, but every work has rules. That work is done only when it is done on its condition. I need both of you to implement this work, because this work will have to be done with 3 people. Tell me both, will you support me?" Jeff said, "I'm tired of my life of poverty. I will support you." Seeing Jeff, Keith also asked to support and asked Frank, "Tell me what we have to do." Frank said, "First of all, we have to see a house that has been closed for a long time and no one has lived in it for a long time. We have to stay in this empty house for 1 whole night and read this book. I will read the book. You just have to support me." Keith and Jeff supported Frank. Frank was a brilliant student in class 11. Frank spent most of his time in the library. He used to read books from all over the world. The next day, the 3 of them started looking for their desired house together, and after 4 to 5 hours, they found the house of their choice. It was a bungalow that had been closed for several months. The owner of this bungalow lived in another city, and this bungalow looked abandoned and deserted from the outside. Frank talked to the watchman to rent the bungalow for 1 night. When the watchman started staring at these people with strange eyes and asked, "Why do you want this bungalow?" Frank said, "I will give you as much money as you want, just for 1 night." On Frank's insistence, the watchman agreed to give the bungalow for 1 night. The 3 of them decided to come in the night, and it was 1 o'clock in the night. Frank chose the top floor of the bungalow and made a circle from the chalk in this room. And the 3 friends, Frank, Keith, and Jeff, sat inside this circle. It was late at night and no one was going to come and go around this bungalow. There were only 4 candles burning at the 4 corners of the room. Frank told Keith and Jeff before opening the book, "I'm going to start reading the book. No one will talk to me until I read the whole book. Neither will I respond to anyone's words. If I leave the book half finished, then all 3 of us will have to suffer the consequences." While reading the book, the devil will come around us in different forms, but as long as we are in this circle, we are safe. If one of me goes out, he will surely die a painful death. Frank asked his friends, "Do you understand what I said?" Both of them nodded yes. Now Frank opened the book and started reading. A few minutes must have passed Windows and doors of the room started to open and close loudly, and the sound of cats crying came from outside. Keith and Jeff were very scared. Suddenly, there was silence in the room. Frank was reading a book. It must have been a little late, and there was a loud knock on the door. Frank motioned for the two to sit down contentedly. In a short while, the room was quiet. The three of them sat in the same place for 1 hour, and Frank was reading a book continuously. 1 hour later, a girl appeared in the room in a white dress. She was very nervous, and addressing Keith, she said, "My daughter has a car accident. Take her to the hospital with me. She's too hurt, or she's gonna die." Keith hears her and stands up, as Jeff grabs Keith's hand and says, "Keith, you forgot what Frank said. Don't go out of the circle." That girl started crying and said, "For God's sake, my daughter will die. Come with me quickly." Jeff was holding Keith's hand tightly and was trying hard not to go out of Keith's circle. But Keith let go of Jeff's hand and walked away with the crying girl while Frank was reading the book. Keith was walking out of the room following the girl in the corridor. Keith suddenly felt a shock, as if he had just regained consciousness. Keith asked the girl, "How did you enter this bungalow?" The girl stopped and turned towards Keith. The girl's face looked very scary and terrifying. Frank and Jeff were sitting in the same circle in their room. Frank was reading the book. Suddenly, Keith entered the same room. He was breathing heavily. "Dude, that girl was right. Her daughter is injured. Her car has also broken down. We should help her. I can't take them to the hospital alone. I need your help." Frank refused to leave the circle with a warning, "Look at Jeff." Keith angrily told Jeff, "Dude, look at me. I'm standing right in front of you. Otherwise, that little girl will die because of us." Keith was constantly asking Jeff to come out, but after Keith's insistence, Jeff suddenly stood up and walked out of the room with Keith. Frank was busy with his reading book. It was past midnight. Suddenly, the light of the room started to turn on and off. Then a girl entered the room. Her face was covered by her long black hair. She walked slowly to Frank and sat in the circle with him. Frank was very scared, and that girl started crying loudly. Frank started his reading book loudly after hearing her voice. Frank's heart was getting scared by the terrible voice of this girl. After crying for a long time, that girl suddenly became silent. When the girl raised her face and looked at Frank, Frank was trembling. Her face was very ugly, terrible, and black. Her eyes were like fire, and she was talking to Frank in a manly voice.
"Stop all this, or I will tear you apart. Stop all this, or else I will do the same to you as what happened to your friends. What made you think that you can control me so easily? Get out of here! This is my house!"
That girl suddenly disappeared, and the room grew dark. When Frank looked on his left side, the girl was staring at him. That girl was so close to him that if he extended his hand, he would touch her.
"Get out of here, and I'll bury you alive."
It seemed as if many men were speaking in unison. Frank was very scared. He was losing his senses due to fear. He only remembered one thing: not to go out of the circle under any circumstances. Frank had fainted, but he was no out of the circle. It was morning. The sun had raised, and when the watchman entered the bungalow, he found the dismembered bodies of Keith and Jeff in the corridor, and Frank lying unconscious in the same circle in the upstairs room. He was breathing. The watchman was so scared that he immediately informed the police. The police sealed the bungalow, and through investigation with the watchman, the bodies were sent for post-mortem, and Frank was admitted to the hospital. The post-mortem report stated that the cause of death of both was due to cardiac arrest. All the bones of the body were broken, and it seemed as if the body had been scratched by some animal. Frank had saved his life by staying in the circle, but seeing with his own eyes the creature with a face filled with horror and fear lost his mental balance. The smartest student in his class has wasted his life.
If you enjoy animated horror stories like this, then subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.